Jai Sri Krishna. This chapter is Moksha Sannyas Yoga. So we have Bhagavan told about sannyas and along with that what karma is, how karma is done, and what are all the entities involved in the karma. So he talked about buddhi, and last thing we talked last time was three types of dhruti. So everything in the sansar is trigunatmak. So there are three types for everything: sattva, raj, and tam. So today we will start with shlok 36, which is where Bhagavan tells that according to three guna, what are the three types of sukh or pleasure, and then he will go into what these three different type of sukh or pleasures are. So let's take shlok 36.
सुखं त्विदानीं त्रिविधं शृणु मे भरतर्षभ अभ्यासाद्रमते यत्र दुःखान्तं च निगच्छते.
Bhagavan says, O the best of Bharat, meaning, O Arjun, now you hear about three types of sukh. We all perform action or the karma to get some pleasure. We always expect some pleasure. We call something good will come out of it. So any karma we perform, we are expecting some pleasurable things come out of it. So what is this sukh or the pleasure? We never thought about what it is. How can we define what sukh is? So if we look into Buddhist philosophy, according to Buddha Dharma, when there is an absence of pain or dukh, that time is pleasure or sukh. When there is pain or dukh, we look at the time before and say that we were happy before. Good old times. Everybody likes to think about how good those times were. But if you look closely, there too we were experiencing pain or dukh. So there is a thing called sukh. Now let us look at the word sukh. To understand dukh, we have to look at what sukh is. In the letter kha, in the word sukh, the letter kha stands for senses or indriya. And letter su, like say suche, right? Su stands for what feels good. Everything is good. So what feels good to the senses is what sukh is. And whatever does not feel good to senses is then dukh or pain. And in Gita, it is described, Bhagavan has described as abhyasat ramate yatra dukhantam cha nigacchati. That in which one dwells naturally. In other words, he enjoys daily by his habit, natural habit. Dukhantam cha nigacchati. And in the end, he is free from dukh. So Gita defines sukh as doing daily as a habit, whatever one enjoys doing naturally. Whatever we enjoy doing naturally, doing it daily. And by doing this, dukhantam cha nigacchati. He attains to the end of dukh for a little while, not all the time, not permanently, but for a little while he attains the end of dukh. So what Bhagavan is saying, sukh is whatever a person enjoys doing by his nature, naturally comes to him, and by doing this he comes to the end of dukh for a little while. So its effect will stay for a little while and then it will end. So Bhagavan Sri Chakradhar has said that sukh is that pleasure that has dukh or pain mixed with it. So these are the same things. Sukh or the pleasure, worldly pleasures, have dukh or pain mixed with it. It comes with it, packaged together. So let's take an example. Most people work for money. They go to work to earn money. So they put in a week of hard work. That is pain. Nobody likes to go to work. Everybody thinks work is painful. You have to work hard. You have to follow rules. And then at the end of the week, they are paid, which is pleasure. Then they feel good. When they get the money, they feel good. So they are experiencing sukh then. When that money is spent, there is dukh or pain again. Now you have to go back to work again and earn more money. Right? However, when there is no pain with the pleasure which has no pain mixed with it, that sukh is beyond measure or atyant. You can't measure that sukh. And that is called anand. So there's two words, sukh and anand. The root of the word anand is nad, which means a flowing stream. That's why we call nadi. River we call nadi. The letter A in Anand stands for from all around. In Gita, Bhagavan says, A Brahma Bhuvan Loka. In chapter 8, slok 16. So Anand is a constantly flowing joy from all around. Not one direction, from all around. The joy is flowing constantly into us and we are experiencing that. That is Anand. It's different from Sukh. It is unlimited. It's unlimited joy which can only be experienced and cannot be explained. Like Sukh you can explain. You feel good in your mind, or you feel hot or cold, whatever you like. You can explain that and you can measure it. Anand is immeasurable. You cannot measure and you cannot explain what it is. It can only be experienced. In Anand there is an exuberance or samriddhi of Sukh. Exuberance of Sukh. It's just unlimited, lot of Sukh coming in from all around. We're feeling pleasure. And there is no end to it. In this slok, however, we are talking about Sukh, not Anand. So when the experience of pleasure or Sukh ends, there is pain or dukh. For example, someone who is living comfortably in a mansion with maids, servants and everything, and he has to leave it or he is evicted from it, he will experience the pain. He'll miss it. So this pleasure, or what we call Sukh, is in fact dukh. That sukh is also dukh, because at the end there is dukh again. Here Bhagavan Sri Krishna has described sukh as the situation in which one gets naturally comfortable. He is comfortable naturally by his own nature, Subhav. However, upon departing from it, he feels pain or dukh. So, what we call pleasure or sukh in reality is pain or dukh, because it ends in pain or dukh. There's a saying, all is well that ends well, correct? But this thing ends not well, ends in dukh. So how can it be well? So this sukh is not well. This fleeing is temporary, it's for a few minutes, for a little while, that's it. Now let's look at this in another way. We use a rope. We use a rope to tie things and keep them together from getting scattered around. So let me find. Anyway, I had brought a rope to show you, but since I can't find right now. Anyway, so if you look at the rope, it has 3 strands. Such a rope is strongest. Every rope has 3 strands. So the Prakriti or Maya uses 3 gunas to conduct the business of the creation. These 3 gunas are the manner in which the Prakriti does this. These are the manners in which Prakriti does. These 3 gunas are the manners or the modes. Here is a rope to tie things up, right? It has 3 strands woven together. So if you look at any rope, it will have 3 strands. I brought this so you may not say I'm not telling the truth. Here is the proof right here. So, and you use the rope for tying things up. If you have a whole bunch of stuff you want to put it together, you tie it. You organize things. So Maya uses 3 gunas. Just look at 3 gunas as one of these 3 strands of the rope woven together, and that is what Prakriti, Maya Prakriti is. And it's just natural thing. It's not somebody created. It's there all the time. It has always been there, these 3 gunas. So these 3 gunas tie things together, keeps the whole creation together. So all the Brahman, everything is tied together, so it won't get scattered around everywhere. It keeps all the Devatas. Devatas are also 3 gunatmak. Means these 3 gunas make the Atma of each and every Devata. So those Devatas are kept under control by Maya through these 3 gunas. Everything is done by 3 gunas. So 3 gunas are the 3 modes of Prakriti. Prakriti uses these 3 gunas to do the business. Otherwise nothing will happen. And Maya is also Trigunatmak. So it's also controlled by these 3 gunas. The 3 gunas are very important. So in Sansar, everything and every activity falls under these 3 evolutes of Prakriti, which are 3 gunas. Prakriti uses the 3 gunas to keep the entire creation together. Thus 3 gunas cause bondage. That is what bandhan is. We are bound by these 3 gunas. So Maya can give us the phal of action of our karma. Whatever we do, everything is under 3 gunas. Thus this sansar is pervaded by the 3 gunas. Therefore, there can be no anand in sansar. When there is bondage, there is no Anand. And we saw earlier what Anand is the bliss or joy flowing, unlimited joy flowing from all around. All the time, there is no end to it. So there is no bondage. But when there is bondage, there cannot be Anand. So in Sansar, there is bondage, so there is no Anand in Sansar. Anand can only be in the Nirgun existence. Meaning there is no gun. Those three gunas do not touch it. It's away from those three gunas. It exists in Ishwar Sarup because Ishwar Sarup is Atit. He's away from all these three gunas. And in its original state, Jeev being Nirgun can experience the state of Anand. Now there is a difference. Ishwar Sarup is Anand. Okay? But Jeev is not Anand. Being Nirgun, Jeev can experience that Anand. It doesn't become Anand, he can experience the Anand. So that's a big difference. And unless we get all of our karma cleaned up, everything clean slate, we cannot be Nirgun state. We will be always in Trigun state. Devata being Trigunatmak have their own Sukh, which their Bhakt call Anand. If there is Bhakt of Vishnu or Mahadev, to them whatever Sukh they get from worshipping those deities, they call that as Anand. But in reality, it is not Anand. Only Jeev, when he becomes free from all karma and their potentiality, not just karma, but potentiality that no other karma will happen by, will be done by him, achieves the state of worthiness to enter the Ishwar Sarup and receive the Anand. Now, according to the three gunas, what are the three types of Sukh? Bhagavan tells this to Arjuna in the next three shlokas. First is the Sattvic Sukh, which he is telling in Shlok 37.
यत्तदग्रे विषमिव परिणामे मृतोपमम् तत्सुखं सात्विकं प्रोक्तम् आत्मबुद्धे प्रसादजम्.
Yat tat agre, that which is at first or in the beginning, Visham iv, feels like poison, feels like wish. That which in the beginning feels like poison or wish. For example, a child who by nature loves to play, to him studying feels like poison. He doesn't like to study because study takes away his playtime. So, similarly, to a person engaged in worldly pleasure or vishay and enjoying them, not knowing the secret of the importance of practice of Ishwar Bhakti, it feels equal to poison. So, if somebody is enjoying the sansar or all the vishay, joys of the vishay, which we just described the sukh, to him, the practice of Ishwar Bhakti, in which he has to restrain from all these, feels equally feels like to him as poison or wish. But Bhagavan says, Pariname Amritopamam. Its result is Amrit, even though it feels like wish in the very beginning of the practice. Its result is Amrit. Tat Sukham. That Sukh, Atma Buddhi Prasadajam, born of placidity of mind and buddhi, Atma Buddhi Prasad, engaged in Ishwar Bhakti, is Satvikam Proktam, has been declared to be Satvik Sukh. So in Satvik Sukh, the characteristic of Satvik Sukh is, in the beginning it feels like poison, doing anything which feels like poison, disagreeable. But if you go through the whole practice, whole action, then its result is Amrit or pleasure. So that is Satvik Sukh. So the Satvik Sukh can only be experienced by one who has dedicated his life to Ishwar Bhakti, because that's where it comes from. And Seva, because it leads one to become one with Ishwar, an experience of the Anand comes to him. So that is Satvik Sukh. We need to understand that this does not happen by itself, because we all are situated predominantly in Rajogun and Tamogun. That's where most all jeeves are. Here one gets help from Ishwar. One has to get help from Ishwar. And then, and only then, he can endure the hardship and the pain during the bhakti. Because in the beginning, it feels like poison. And to endure that poison, that pain and hardship, we need to get help from Ishwar. Then he is able to see the Swarup of the Atma. What happens then? Pariname Amritopamam. That which felt like poison or wish, now it becomes Amrit or nectar to him. Same thing, which in the beginning felt like wish or poison, feels like Amrit. So after enduring the hardship of bhakti, when he sees the Swarup of Ishwar from within, that is what is Amrit. That is what Amrit is. There's nothing that you can drink, like they say in Puran. You got Amrit and all the Devta got Amrit and became immortal. That's not Amrit is. Amrit, one can be Amrit only after he gets he gets to know the Ishwar Sarup, because that's where all the Ishwar Sarup is Amrit. This boon of grace provides his Atma and Buddhi an uninterrupted flow of Sukh. When this happens, then this provides his Atma or Man and Buddhi an uninterrupted flow of Sukh, as we talked before. Now Bhagavan goes to tell Arjuna what are the characteristics of Rajasi Sukh. The next slok.
विषयेन्द्रिय संयोगात् यत्तदग्रे मृतोपमम् परिणामे विषमिव तत्सुखं राजसंस्मृतम्.
This is straightforward. Bhagavan says, when sense objects come in contact with their respective senses, yat vishayendriya sanyogat tat agre amritopamam. In the beginning, that bhog, Vishay bhog, feels like amrit. Okay? When the sense objects come in contact with one's senses, then he enjoys that contact. At that moment, in the beginning, It feels like Amrit. Pariname Vishamiv. However, in the end, it results in poison. It's opposite to Sattvic Sukh. Tat Sukham Rajasam Smritam. That Sukh has been spoken of as Rajasic. So, somebody likes to enjoy eating very delicious food, right? And they are served with delicious food, lot of sweets and shrikand or whatever they like, they are served with it. They enjoy eating it. At that moment, oh, they are in heaven. They really love it, right? How nice the food is. And they keep eating and eating and eating. Pariname Vishamev. Then, later that night, their stomach gets upset. Okay. So, Parinam is wish. In the beginning, when the sense objects come in contact with our senses and we get the joy of that or the sukh of that, we feel very good, it's Amrit. But later on, in the end, it ends up as wish. So that is Rajasi Sukh. Now next Bhagavan goes into what Tamasi Sukh is like in the next sloka.
यदग्रे चानुबन्धे च सुखं मोहनमात्मनः निद्रालस्य प्रमादोत्थं तत्तामसमुदाहृतम्
Yat agre cha anubandhe cha sukham moham atmana. Nidra alasya pramada utthatam tamasam udahratam. Yat sukham, that sukh, that pleasure, agre cha anubandhe cha, which in the beginning and in the sequel, or that what results in mohan atmana, putting atma in state of moh or delusion. Such sukh arising out of nidra alasya pramadotham, sleep, indolence and carelessness or negligence. Tat tamasam udahartam. That is said to be tamasic sukh. So here somebody likes to sleep. Oh, I love to sleep. They sleep for a long time. They don't want to get up in the morning. When they get up, they don't feel very fresh because too much sleep is not good either. And then it takes for time for them to get awakened. So that's alasya. And later on they become careless because they enjoy resting and not doing anything. That's what tamasic sukh is. So an example of such sukh is if a person takes joy in intoxication. In the beginning, he feels good. This feeling good creates moh to the Atma. But its result will be what it results in? Nidra alasya. It gives rise to sleep. And when he opens his eye, he does not want to get up. Thus, it brought on lethargies, alasya. In this state, he will do work. But how would he work? Carelessly, with pramad. And he will make mistakes in his work. So the three types of sukh experienced by human in sansar is differentiated by its effect on the Atma. how does it affect Atma? The Sattvic Sukh steers one's Atma towards Paramatma. The Rajasic Sukh brings down the Atma to identify itself with the senses and the physical body. However, the Tamasic Sukh takes the Atma into delusion or moh. So there are three different kind of Sukh and they have different effect on our Atma. Now next slok, Bhagavan summarizes. He summarizes the subject matter of three gunas. So in the next slok, Bhagavan will say the subject of three gunas.
न तदस्ति पृथिव्यां वा दिवि देवेषु वा पुनः सत्त्वं प्रकृतिजैर्मुक्तं यदेभे स्यात् त्रिभिर्गुणैः.
We need to pay attention to what Bhagavan has said in this shlok. This will make things clear. Bhagavan says, Prithibhyam, on the earth, Va or Divi means in the heavens, Antariksh or in the space, and Deveshu or among Devatas, different Devatas. Va punah or anywhere besides these three places, on the earth, in the space or antariksh, in the heavens, or in the devatas, or besides any of these three places, tat sattvam na asti, there is nothing that exists. Yat, that which, syat is muktam, free of or devoid of tribhi guna, the three gunas. Prakritirjaya, born of the Prakriti. So Bhagavan says there is no place anywhere on the earth, in the antariksh or space, or in the heavens, or in devatas, where there are no three gunas exist. They are everywhere. In the Prakriti, they are born out of Prakriti, and these three gunas exist everywhere. They have pervaded everything. So you cannot find any corner, anywhere, where these three gunas are not present. So anything, sattvam, that is free from the bondage of three gunas. Remember these three gunas, what they do? They cause bondage. These three gunas of the Prakriti cannot be found anywhere in the creation. Any place, anything that is free from the bondage of three gunas of the Prakriti cannot be found anywhere in the creation. You cannot find any place. Not on the earth, or in the heavens, nor among Devata. You go wherever you want to go. You're free to go, but you will not be free from these three gunas. There is no place. Therefore, remember that these three gunas of the Prakriti make up the fabric of sansar. This whole sansar, this fabric, like you put together a blanket. So it's got different threads in there, right? So that's the fabric of the blanket. Same way the sansar's fabric, which is sansar's fabric, is three gunas. These three gunas are everywhere, in every way. You cannot get away from in the sansar. Earlier in Shlok 7, Bhagavan has said that niyatasya tu sannyasah karmano nopapadyate. giving up the karma that has been niyat or has been decided for us by the subhav, by our subhav, is not proper. Whatever our niyat karma is, what niyat karma is, which is decided, it's niyat karma. It is your duty, dutiful karma, which is decided by your subhav, and we'll come to later on what subhav is. So giving it up is not proper because it has been decided by the past or past karma. One is unable to let go of them. You cannot get away from them. Whatever our past karma are, they decide what our action will be in this, niyat karma will be in this life. And we cannot get away from it. We have to go through it. One is unable to let go of them. In Shlok 33 of chapter 3, Bhagavan has said that even if one becomes jnani, he acts according to the subhav, which is the result of his past karma. Even jnani cannot get away from it. No one can get away. No one is beyond the effect of our niyat karma. We have to do our niyat karma, what we came here to do. Prakriti yant bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. All prani bhuts are dependent on their prakriti or subhav, and act accordingly. In this sansar, they all prani bhut act accordingly. What can external restraint or hut do? There's nothing he can do about it. You can try whatever you want to try. It'll come right back to what our niyat karma is. So, nigraha means putting outside, changing from outside is not going to do anything. Therefore, one cannot act outside of his prakriti, his subhav, with which he is born. Now here, you see, everybody is different. Everybody's nature is totally different. No two people have same nature. There may be some similarities, but it's not the same nature. Because nobody's karma are same to any other person's karma. And our karma make our subhav. Okay? So Bhagavan wants to say that all varna is the wrongful word. It's been wrongfully called caste. Varna is not caste. Varna is varna. Have been decided by our karma and prakriti. This leads us into the subject matter of varna dharma. Bhagavan has said that chatur varnam maya shashtam guna karma vibhagasha. The four varna, he didn't say caste, he didn't say jati, he said varna, or the order of society. Varna is the order of society. How the society will run. It's going to run in an order through these varna, these four varna. Brahma, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. They were created by me by the differentiation of guna and karma. So we need to understand something about karma. You see, anything that we do has its origin in our thought. First we think about it. We all think of many things that we like to or want to do. Our mind is always engaged in thinking, planning, plotting. I'm going to do this. Tomorrow I'm going to do this. We make a list of what we're going to be doing, right? We prioritize our list. It goes on and on and on. That's what mind is engaged all the time. But in time, we tend to forget them. Later, as the time is right to do any of those things which we had thought of but forgot, our Devta reminds us that the time is right for you to do this. what you have been thinking about earlier. Thus, the Devta instigates us to engage in the karma. Every Devta has one of the three gunas under which it is classified. For example, Vishnu represents Satogun, Brahma represents Rajogun, and Shiv represents the Tamogun. Since all Devtas are Trigunatmak, they all have all three gunas. One of them is primary one and the other two are subordinate, but they all have all three gunas. So they are also bound in bondage of these three gunas. Next, our thought depends on our Swabhava. First, we think about plan something, right? To do something, we make plans. But that thought, it depends on our Swabhava, our nature, how we think. Everyone thinks differently. How do we think is different one from one another. So our thought depends on our Swabhava. Whatever our Swabhava is, that's how we think. And that's how our thought, the end results of thinking is thought. Thought is the product of thinking. So, and we think according to our Swabhava. So the thought is the result of our Swabhava. It reflects our Swabhava. And our Swabhava is based on our past karma. So we will think of and act based on our Swabhava or our past karma. We cannot get away from it. So our action will be classified under a primary gun and a devata. Representing that gun will administer the fruit of that karma. Devata which represents that gun will administer the fruit of that action or karma which we did based on our thought. Since during performing any karma, we all do activities which belong to other two gunas. You do really very sattvic, very religious work, right? But along with that, knowingly or unknowingly, other two gunas come in too. Because the whole Prakriti is made out of three gunas. You cannot get away from three gunas. So every gun has other two gunas associated with. So it's all Trigunatmak. The fruit of the action will represent the other two gunas also. That is why all phal have both. Whatever we get in sansar have both pleasure as well as pain in varying degree. Now let's take an example of Swabhava. So somebody, naturally he was born as a carpenter with his Swabhava. But he also got opportunity to act like a Brahman. However, he will do the action of both carpenter as well as Brahman. But the action of a carpenter will come to him naturally. Naturally, he has no problem doing the carpentry work because that is he is born with that Swabhava. However, now he has the guna within him to choose which one of these two actions he wants to enhance. He is doing both now, doing carpentry work as well as Brahman work, doing puja. Now he can choose which one he wants to enhance, which one he wants to make much stronger. If through his sham, dam, he is able to increase his shraddha, bhakti, he can become a Brahman. Sham is restraint of his mind, and dam is restraining his indriyas. Because remember in the Satoguni, Sukh, both, the Sham and Dam is involved in both of them. So he can do bhakti, he can enhance that part, and he can become a Brahman. This is what Bhagavan is saying here in the next shlok. Varna Dharma is start of the subject matter of the Varna Dharma here, Bhagavan is saying.
ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय विशाम शूद्राणाम च परन्तप कर्माणि प्रविभक्तानि स्वभाव प्रभवैर्गुणैः.
This division of karma into gunas gives rise to one's varna. The division of karma into guna gives rise to one's varna. A person may be born in a family of any varna, but his own varna is decided by his own karma and guna, which he is born with. True, he will be affected by the karma of the family of his birth, but he will be able to raise himself to a different varna. He can change it because whatever he is born with, he will excel in doing that. And even though he is born in different varna family, he can go on and become his own different varna. For the society to run in harmony, everyone's activities are divided into 4 classes, which we call varna. These are Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So if you look at it, even in today's time, those teachers, they are all doing Brahman work. Those people who go to fight wars, they are doing Kshatriya work. Vaishya, people are doing business, they are doing the Vaishya work. And the service industry, waiters and everybody else, they are all coming into Shudra. It doesn't mean the Shudra is any lower than Brahman or vice versa. But they are all important. The society cannot run without all 4 of them. So there are 4 different division of labor, you may call that society people have got to do. So one can be doing both jobs, teaching and then also go and wait on tables too, at the same time, right? People do that. So that doesn't mean that they are 2 varna. Their main varna is Brahman varna, but they are also doing the work of Shudra at the same time. It doesn't make them any lower. The difference of how comes about due to 3 gunas. Swabhava, Prabhavair guna. These Swabhava comes due to 3 gunas. In chapter 4, Bhagavan has already said this, the following, Chatur Varnam Maya Shashtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. So why did he say this here again? Because one cannot ignore and leave his niyat or assigned karma. Niyat karma is what is assigned to you according to your swabhava. For example, Arjun being born with the Kshatriya dharma as his niyat or the assigned karma, wanted to leave it and become a Brahman. His Kshatriya dharma was his swabhava. Swabhava means swab and bhav, or one's own nature, which is born itself with him. Nobody gave it to him. It is born with him according to his karma. Bhagavan says, Swabhava Prabhavaya Guna, meaning our own nature or Swabhava is born. Prabhava means being born out of according to the 3 gunas. Is born out of 3 gunas. So one may be born to a family of any Varn, but his Swabhav will enable him to act according to it. So Bhagavan says, Arjun, the duties of Brahman, the Kshatriya, Vaishya as well as that of the Shudra have been assigned according to Guna, born of their own nature or their own Swabhav. So in the next three shlokas, Bhagavan describes the natural karma of each one of these varna. Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya and Shudra. So first he is talking about description of natural karmas of a Brahman.
शमो दमस्तपः शौचम् क्षान्तिरार्जवमेव च ज्ञानं विज्ञानमास्तिक्यम् ब्रह्मकर्म स्वभावजम्.
Brahman is one in whom certain qualities are born. So they come out, they come to him naturally. It's born with him. They constitute his nature or Swabhav. What are these qualities which are born with him? First one, Bhagavan says, Sham. Subjugation or Nigrah of the mind. Not letting the mind wander, practicing concentration. That's what mind should not wander around in wasteful things. It should practice concentration. That is Sham, to control the mind. Dam, suppressing the thirst of senses. Want to listen to nice music, we go to any distance to listen to music, right? Want to eat very good food, we heard the restaurant in Tampa, Orlando, wherever it is, caters the best food, so we run to that. That's not Brahman. Daman. No, we will not do that. Tapa, enduring the hardship for the discharge of sacred obligations. Whenever you have to do some sacred obligations, there's gonna be a lot of hardships. So you have to endure that. So Brahman does that. Shaucham, external and internal purity. He keeps his body clean and he keeps his mind clean. Fraudulent ideas do not come to his mind. He doesn't want to say, if I can get something for nothing, by fraud or cheating somebody. Those things do not come to his mind. Kshanti, forgiving the fault of others. Arjavam, straightforwardness, straightness of the mind, senses and behavior. That's Arjav. Astikyam, having Shraddha in Vedas, scriptures, Ishwar Gyan and afterlife. He has reverence for all these things. Jnanam, studying and teaching scriptures, and Vijnanam, experiencing the Ishwar Tattva. All these are Brahma Karma Swabhavajam, the natural or Swabhavik karma of Brahman. Brahman means the one who goes for Vedas. Gyan is also known as Ved. So a Brahman is one who remains humble and pursues Gyan. In the next shlok, Bhagavan describes the karma of a Kshatriya, what Kshatriya does. Kshatriya, Swabhavik karma of Kshatriya, the natural karmas of Kshatriya.
शौर्यं तेजो धृतिर्दाक्ष्यं युद्धे चाप्यपलायनं दानमीश्वरभावश्च क्षात्रं कर्म स्वभावजम्.
So as a Brahman is one who pursues the Gyan. For him it is necessary that he remains humble and get Gyan. Now what is the meaning of Kshatriya, word Kshatriya? The root word of Kshatriya is Kshat. It means a wound. So a Kshatriya is one who takes wounds on his body to protect others. The one who is capable of doing this must be knowledgeable of the warfare. You have to know how to fight. Kshatriya, Bhagavan says, has shauryam, heroism. He becomes a hero. He does a heroic job. This is an abstract noun and it is derived from the word shur, which means courageous or brave, bravery. Shauryam is bravery. So, Kshatram karma swabhavajam, the natural karma of a Kshatriya includes shaurya, being courageous, teja, boldness, he is bold, he is not afraid, the one who is fearless, dhrati, he's got tenacity, he is tenacious in doing whatever he is doing, he's going to fight, or protect the people he is going to protect. Firmness or fortitude. Dakshyam, diligence, dexterity. And yuddhe api, also in the battle, aplayanam, not to run away from the fight. He doesn't run away from the fight. He fight to the end. Kshatriya always does that. Danam, he is generous. He has got generosity. He gives dan. And Ishwar Bhava, selflessly ruling over his subjects. In the old days, the kings used to be Kshatriya. So they used to rule. So rule selflessly. A good Kshatriya rules selflessly. As a father looks after his children, all these are Kshatram karma swabhavajam, natural karma of a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is not just one person who just goes and fights, picks up fight, no. Next comes the karma of Vaishya and Shudra. Their natural or swabhavik karma. Bhagavan is describing next shloka.
कृषिगौरक्षवाणिज्यं वैश्यकर्मस्वभावजं परिचर्यात्मकं कर्म शूद्रस्यापि स्वभावजम्.
Krishi Goraksha Vanijyam, agriculture, animal rearing or animal husbandry, and honest exchange of merchandise. Vanijya doesn't mean dishonest. Here, what Vanijya is, the honest exchange of merchandise, not ripping the other person off, taking advantage of situation. Vaishya karma swabhavajan, they are the natural karma of a Vaishya. And paricharyatmakam, performing seva to all, karma shudra api, swabhavajam, is the natural karma of the Shudra. Now before we move further, we need to ask a question. What is meaning behind the karma of different varna? This we must understand in accordance with the Ishwar Gyan. I'll try to explain this with the hope that it will bring clarity and shed some light on this very important topic. As we have seen earlier in chapter 4, Bhagavan has said that 4 varna, or the 4 orders of the society, were created by me. classifying them according to the predominant guna and apportioning a corresponding duties to them. This is the first part of the Shlok 13. The second part of the Shlok is very important. Here Bhagavan tells us through his disciple Arjun, he is telling us through his disciple Arjun that although I am the author thereof, know me, the changeless Parmeshwar, Akarta. Bhagavan says that in reality he is a non-doer. So let's hold this thought and go to Shlok 9 of the 4th chapter, where Bhagavan says that he who thus knows by tattva, in true light, my divine birth and action, O Arjun, leaving the body, he is not born again, he attains to me. So now let us understand the following. Taking birth implies a change, don't it? It's a change. But Bhagavan says that he is changeless. So how a change can occur in one who is changeless? That is the divineness of his birth, which is called avatar. So when he knows that, he says will not come back again and will not get body again. Doing something or the karma also causes change. And how can one who is non-doer or of anything, he is not doing anything, how can he do anything? Person who is a non-doer, how can he do it? Hopefully the following will help us understand this. You see, there is Ishwar Tattva. Where there is Ishwar Tattva is Parmeshwar. Where Ishwar becomes Parmeshwar, there is Maya with him, which is his primordial Shakti. It is the Shakti that does all of the actions of Ishwar. Ishwar doesn't do anything. He is Akarta. For the Uddhar of Jeev, there are 3 actions that have always been present from the very beginning. These are creation, Ishwar Avatar, and dissolution or Sanghar. This comes about after every Jeev has been given the Ishwar Gyan one time. So this cycle will continue until all Jeevs attain their place within the Ishwar Sarup, which is limitless, which is merciless, which is glorious, full of grace and Gyan, Anand, beyond thought, etc., etc. Now Maya did the creation according to Maya Gyan. Since Ishwar did not say how to create, he just said there should be creation. And Maya cannot get the Nirgun Gyan of Ishwar. So Maya did everything and she continues to run the Trigunatmak creation according to her own Gyan accordingly. Jeev comes in Sansar to get the fruit of his action and do more actions. We are all born with our nature or the Swabhav, which is based on our past karma and to some extent tailored to experiencing the fruit of our action. Since our karma are different from others, we all have different Swabhav. Karma is only possible because of the Swabhav. Without Swabhav, you cannot do the karma. So each karma of each varna, so are the karma associated with them. So every varna is based on the Swabhav or on the guna and karma, and the karma is also based on the varna. They were created by Maya to conduct the business of the creation. Maya created all this. I like to emphasize that our life is the fruit of our past karma. Now, how do we partake of this fruit? We take little by little all the time, or we take all at one time. We'll decide what will be our next fruit that we will receive. So karma results in its own fruit, and acting on that fruit is also a karma, and this karma decides the next fruit. So everything in sansar is primarily an unending karma. Here Bhagavan has described the action according to 4 varna. Next, he tells us how we can attain Ishwar while acting according to our own varna dharma, not copying somebody else. This is where we will start in our next meeting. Sri Krishna.